When I first moved into the apartment, I didn't think much of the locked door in the hallway. The landlord said it led to an old maintenance room that hadn't been used in years. I nodded and forgot about it. Rent was cheap and the building was quiet, which was all I cared about. It was one of those narrow, 3-story complexes built sometime in the 70s, with thin walls and carpet that had been replaced too many times. I lived alone for the first time in years. My job kept me busy editing video footage for local businesses. Nights were the hardest because silence felt heavier here. The pipes made strange clicking sounds when the heat kicked in, and the lights flickered sometimes when someone upstairs turned on the shower. I told myself it was just an old building. Nothing unusual. But every night, around 2 a.m, I'd wake up to a faint sound coming from that locked door. It wasn't banging or scraping. It was rhythmic, like slow breathing pressed against wood. I tried ignoring it for the first week. I turned on a fan at night and left the TV running low. It didn't help. The sound got louder, steady and patient, like something waiting for me to notice. When I asked the landlord about it again, he shrugged, said maybe a raccoon got into the crawl space. I wanted to believe him. But raccoons don't breathe in patterns. They don't stop when you hold your breath to listen closer. By the end of the second week, I started locking my bedroom door before sleeping. Not because I was scared, at least that's what I told myself, but because something about that steady sound made me feel watched. Every time I passed that hallway, I'd glance at the doorknob. It was scratched around the keyhole, like someone had tried to open it once, long ago. The building always smelled faintly like dust and bleach. But near that door it smelled different, damp like soil after rain. The landlord never came by again. He stopped replying to my messages. That's when I decided to buy a small screwdriver. I kept the screwdriver in a drawer for 3 days before using it. Each night the breathing behind that door grew louder, slower, closer. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, maybe an animal, maybe nothing. I only knew that the sound wasn't in my head. On the 4th night I finally gave in. It was almost midnight. The hallway light buzzed and flickered while I crouched in front of the door. The keyhole was rusted. I slid the screwdriver into the space between the frame and the latch, twisting carefully until I heard a soft click. The door didn't open all the way. Something on the other side was blocking it, something heavy. A faint smell rolled out, wet wood and something metallic. I shone my phone's flashlight inside, but the light didn't travel far. Just dust, old pipes, and what looked like a stack of black trash bags pressed against the wall. I pushed a little harder. The door gave an inch more. That's when I heard it again. Breathing, close now, as if someone was standing just behind the bags. I froze. The air felt thick, like the whole hallway was holding its breath with me. After a few seconds, the breathing stopped. The silence was worse. I backed away slowly, keeping the light fixed on the crack. I waited. Nothing moved. I shut the door, pushed a chair against it, and went back to my room. I didn't sleep. Every sound in the building made me jump. Pipes, floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Around 3 a.m. I thought I heard the doorknob rattle once. Just once. Like someone testing if it was still locked. The next morning I called the landlord again. No answer. I went downstairs to his office. The door was locked and a sheet of paper was taped to it. It said out of town for repairs in messy handwriting. No phone number. That night the breathing started again. But it wasn't behind the locked door anymore. It was somewhere closer, softer, like it had moved into the walls. It's been 3 nights since I last slept. The breathing stopped, but now I hear footsteps. They start in the hallway and stop outside my bedroom door. Always the same time, around 2 a.m. Last night, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat in bed with my phone light on, waiting. The footsteps came again, slow and deliberate, one at a time, until they stopped right outside. Then nothing. I whispered, "Who's there?" But there was no answer, just silence. I got up and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The chair I'd pushed against the maintenance door was lying on the floor. The door was wide open. Inside, the black bags were gone. There's something else now leaning against the wall near my apartment door. A set of deep footprints, wet and bare, leading straight to my room. I think they stopped coming from behind the door. I think they came through. I moved into my new house on Birch Lane at the start of October. It wasn't much, just a small 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a porch that leaned slightly to the right. But it felt peaceful, quiet, and far enough from the city to breathe. My job allowed me to work from home, so most days I just kept to myself. I'd take short walks in the evenings, watch the sunset, and listen to the sound of dry leaves scraping across the pavement. Across the street was an old pale blue house that looked empty. The curtains were always drawn, and the yard hadn't been mowed in months. But I'd see a faint light flicker through one of the upstairs windows every night around 9, just a small glow that would fade after a few minutes. I assumed someone lived there, maybe an old man who didn't get out much. A few days later, a letter showed up in my mailbox with no return address. The envelope was yellowed and thin, the name written in neat cursive. It was addressed to the new resident. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Now please stop staring at my house." The words were written in the same careful handwriting. There was no signature. I froze on my porch reading it again and again. I didn't think I'd been staring at anyone's house. Maybe someone had seen me glancing during my walks and took it the wrong way. I crumpled the paper and tossed it in the trash, telling myself it was nothing. That night, when I looked out my window, the faint light was already glowing in the blue house. But something was different this time. The curtain had been pulled back just a few inches. I could see the shape of someone standing there, still and silent, watching. I stepped back from the window, heart thudding. I told myself not to overthink it. This was just some old neighbor who didn't like newcomers. Nothing more. The next morning I found another envelope on my porch. This one wasn't in the mailbox. It was tucked beneath the welcome mat. The message inside was shorter than before. "You shouldn't have looked again." I didn't sleep that night. Every small sound made me tense. The creak of the floorboards, the ticking of the clock, even the soft hum of the refrigerator. It all felt louder, closer. By morning I had convinced myself it was some prank. Maybe a bored teenager who knew a new person had moved in. I told myself that over and over, trying to believe it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I kept the blinds shut that day, but around 9 o'clock, curiosity got the better of me. I opened them just enough to peek out. The light in the blue house was there again, faint but steady. The curtain was wide open this time. The window itself was empty, but I could feel someone on the other side just out of view. I backed away from the window and sat down. The air in the room felt heavier, like something was pressing down on it. Then came the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow, careful, one step at a time. When the knock finally came, it was soft, almost polite. I didn't move. It came again. 3 short knocks, evenly spaced. I waited another minute before forcing myself to look through the peephole. There was no one there. Just an envelope on the mat. This one was old, the paper yellowed, almost brown, the edges curled. I picked it up with shaking hands and tore it open. The message inside was written in that same careful cursive. "Mo, do not answer when they call your name." That was it. No explanation. No signature. The phone rang right after I finished reading. The sound made me jump so hard I dropped the paper. It was my landline, the one no one ever used. I let it ring. After a few seconds, the answering machine clicked on. There was silence at first, then a faint voice. It was a whisper. "Steve." Only my parents and a few old friends called me that. I hadn't told anyone my new number. I unplugged the phone, locked the doors, and checked the windows twice. Then I sat in the dark, listening. The light across the street never went out that night. By the next evening, I had decided to leave. I packed a small bag, turned off all the lights, and sat by the front door waiting for the night to pass. Around 9, I heard it again. The faint hum from across the street. I looked through the crack in my blinds. The upstairs window in the blue house was glowing brighter than ever, a sickly yellow light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Something moved behind the curtain. Not a shadow, a shape. It leaned forward until a face pressed against the glass. It wasn't clear or solid, more like an outline filled with static. The head tilted slowly like it was trying to see through the darkness. Then from inside my own house, the phone started ringing again. The same landline I had unplugged the night before. I froze, staring at it as it rang and rang. When it stopped, a voice came from the other side of the front door. "Steve." It was the same whisper I'd heard on the answering machine. Only now it was right outside. I didn't move. My breath caught in my throat. The handle turned. Just a small, careful twist. Then another. I stepped back, heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo through my chest. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The door creaked open an inch, then stopped. Silence. After a few seconds, I forced myself to push it shut and lock it again. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat there with the lights on, waiting for the sun. When morning came, I opened the door and found one last envelope on the porch. It was newer than the others, clean and white. No cursive this time, just 3 words printed in black ink. "You looked again." Across the street, the blue house stood dark. The curtains were gone, the windows boarded up. It looked completely abandoned. A neighbor walked by later that day. I asked about the house. He glanced at it, confused. That place, he said. No one's lived there for years, not since the man who owned it disappeared. You're the first person to move in across from it since. I didn't ask any more questions. I just nodded and went inside. The phone rang again that night. I had just finished my shift at the plant, a long, dragging day that left me more tired than I'd been in months. It was late, later than I usually drive home. The highway out of town stretches through flat fields and scattered farmhouses. At this hour, nothing moves except the occasional fox or deer. My headlights cut narrow lines through the dark, and the moon hung thin and pale, just bright enough to cast shadows that danced along the roadside. I tried to focus on the road, counting the fences or the old barns as they passed to keep myself awake. Everything felt normal at first. I noticed the occasional flicker of light from a window, a tractor shed standing empty, and the way the wind whispered through the crops. My car hummed along the asphalt, steady and predictable. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something near a ditch. A figure? Maybe just a scarecrow, or the way the shadows hit the fence. I glanced again and it was gone. I told myself it was fatigue, just my imagination after 12 hours on my feet. I leaned back in my seat and tried to shake it off. Nothing around me had changed. The houses were still scattered, the road still empty, the moon still low. It was quiet, peaceful almost. Yet something about the way the shadows moved made me uneasy. I couldn't pinpoint it, but the feeling stuck. My pulse quickened a little, though I told myself I was being silly. I kept driving, trying to focus on the road and ignore the feeling creeping up my spine. But then I noticed it again, a shadow at the edge of the field, standing perfectly still. I blinked and it seemed closer than before, almost on the shoulder of the road. My heart skipped. I thought maybe someone was out walking, but who would be here at this hour? In the middle of nowhere, just standing? The moon hid behind a cloud and the road went dark for a few seconds. When it came back, the figure was gone. I told myself I was imagining things. The fatigue was getting to me. Maybe I needed to rest, a quick stop somewhere, anything to shake this feeling. But the nearest gas station was miles behind, and I didn't dare pull over. As I drove, I started noticing other things. The fences that had been visible moments ago seemed to vanish into blackness. The road narrowed in the headlights like the darkness was closing in around me. I saw movement in the ditches, shapes that darted out of sight before I could fully make them out. Jackets, jeans, shadows that weren't animals. I gripped the wheel tighter. Then I saw him again, standing by a ditch up ahead. A thin man in dark clothing, pale face, long nose. His posture was casual, almost curious, like he was waiting. My stomach twisted. I tried to keep calm, reminding myself he couldn't reach me in the car. But every instinct screamed that something wasn't right. My headlights passed him, and the road ahead swallowed him whole. I caught glimpses of others, too, fleeting shadows along the way, just far enough that I couldn't make them out clearly. I didn't slow down, didn't want to stop, didn't want to know. The moon disappeared again, leaving only my headlights and the dash lights. I felt completely alone. For the next few miles, my nerves stretched tight. Every movement in the darkness, every glint of light off a fence post made me flinch. I started to doubt my own senses. Were these people real? Was it some kind of trick my mind was playing after exhaustion and stress? I couldn't tell anymore. The silence around me was heavy, almost pressing in, broken only by the hum of my tires and the occasional wind rustling through the fields. The further I went, the more I felt it, like the night was watching me, and every shadow I passed was waiting for me to notice. The tension built tight in my chest, and I knew I had to make it home without stopping, without looking away. I rounded a bend and froze. There, in the middle of the road, was a figure, not far off, but directly in my path. I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering, vision narrowing to the pale face framed by dark, ragged hair. The man didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead. My pulse raced as my hands gripped the wheel, every instinct screaming to swerve, to flee, to just disappear from this stretch of road. I swerved, barely missing him, tires skidding across the asphalt. My stomach lurched as my headlights caught another movement in the ditch. Something smaller this time. A child in a bright yellow jacket stepping out into the faint light. Panic surged and I jerked the wheel back, narrowly avoiding a collision. The thin man remained, his expression unreadable, almost calm. as if he was guiding the chaos rather than being part of it. I floored the accelerator, heart thundering, hands shaking. The road stretched endlessly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were everywhere, waiting for me to slow down, to look away for a second. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Darkness swallowed the fields, no shapes, no shadows, just black. But in that brief glance, I could swear the pale face lingered, watching, smiling in some strange, hollow way. Seconds felt like hours. Every curve, every ditch, every shadow made me flinch. I didn't dare breathe fully, didn't dare look to the side. The silence pressed on me, heavy and unrelenting. My headlights lit the road, but no matter how far I went, it felt like the darkness behind me followed, swallowing everything I had passed. Finally, I saw the glow of the city lights in the distance, a small relief after miles of emptiness. I drove faster, keeping the wheel tight, eyes locked straight ahead. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't look back. The shadows might have been gone, but the memory of them pressed on my mind, heavy and unshakable. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a long time, car idling, heart still racing. The night outside was quiet, peaceful almost, the way it had been before. But I knew it wasn't the same. Something followed me along that road, something I couldn't see clearly, but could feel in the marrow of my bones. Something waiting maybe for the next stretch of empty road and the next tired driver foolish enough to pass through. I didn't tell anyone about that night. Some things you keep to yourself, because if you speak them aloud, you might just draw them back into the world.